Well, gentlemen, we start the show this week being the post-grand final show along these lines. I told you that thing would come in handy.
We're gonna win. Don't wanna be a loser, gonna win. 'Cause winning really is the only thing. Get out of the way, we're coming in. If you wanna fight, you step inside the ring. Does anybody wanna take a swing? It's gotta be all or nothing. Oh, we're gonna be the champions. Yeah, we're going all the way, we're gonna win.
Bards. From the back line. We didn't do it all year, but I think it's right to do it this week.
All right, so you want to from the back line of what our side was 2 weeks ago?
Yep. We want to remind our listeners how good this team was and who they were.
Okay, so the 2014 Hawthorn Premiership team from the back line. Birchall, Lake and Gibson, halfbacks Suckling, Stratton and Mitchell, centre line Lewis, Langford and Hill, the half forward line Hodge, Roughhead and Smith, forward line McAvoy, Gunston, Bruce, followers David Hale, Shields, Burgoyne and the interchange of Spanger, Rioli, Puopolo and Duray.
All right, scores, Bards.
Scores Hawthorn 21-11, 137, defeating Sydney 11-8, 74.
And goal kickers?
Roughhead 5, Bruce 3, Langford 3, Gunston 2, Hodge 2, Burgoyne 2, and singles 2, Puopolo, Suckling, Hale and Hill.
Wedders, at what point did you enjoy every one of those goals?
At what point did I enjoy every one of those goals?
Probably when each one was kicked, I'm guessing.
When did you start savouring those goals?
When Hodge intercepted the Gary Rowan kick out and then sent it straight back over his head, that was game over.
Yeah, it was game, set and match. So, Bards, the all-important Bardslow votes.
All right, I've taken a little bit of liberty here with grand final votes because it was such an all-round performance. So if you add the votes up, they'll still add up to normal, but I've split them up a bit. So the 5, the 4 and the 3 are split evenly, 4 votes each. Hodge, Mitchell and Lewis, clearly our 3 best players on the day. The 2 and the 1 added together and split it up again for 1 vote each to Gibson, Langford and Roughhead. And blokes like Burgoyne, Hill, Bruce, Lake, etc., all a little bit unlucky not to be included.
So, Bards, I updated the spreadsheet earlier because you did give me the insight as to what those votes would be. We knew Jordan Lewis had won the Bardslow and you did try to present it to him last Saturday night, but security got a hold of you and you couldn't get onto the stage. But he won with 44 votes, followed by Luke Hodge on 35. Sam Mitchell, who was out for a fair bit of it, on 32 came third. Gunston and Roughhead were equal fourth on 26. And Will Langford, surprisingly, came 6th on 25. And there was 28 players that you gave votes to during the course of the season. So, well done to Jordan Lewis. The Bardslow, when we get it minted, is going to be in the mail to you sometime soon.
That's a nice spread of votes. And how many I give to Grant Birchall? Because I think he surprised a few on Saturday night.
You were lucky he didn't win at Bards. You were going to be in trouble because he only got 12.
It wouldn't be unusual. How many did I get last year? Not many. Defenders overrated.
No. And you overcompensated this year because you gave Gibbo 18.
That's not bad. He only played about 5 games.
Well, Wedders, we've been doing a lot of the talking. Remind us about this game, how good it was.
Well, it was won and lost in the first quarter of an hour, in my opinion, even though it was tight up until that point. Hawthorn came out 22 tackles for 7 in the first quarter. They hunted Sydney, who were expected to hunt the Hawthorn ball carrier. I find it staggering that you can lead in tackles, contested possession and overall possession by well over 100 or 150 possessions in the end, I just find that staggering in a grand final. The pressure that Hawthorn exerted on Sydney allowed our guys, when we actually got the ball, plenty of time to use it, and there just didn't seem to be a lot of nerves in the Hawthorn side. Once we sort of steadied the ship early, it was lights out not long after quarter time.
The real intent was showed right in front of us within about the first couple of minutes, wasn't it? When Buddy Franklin ran out onto a lead, looked like it was going to be pinged on his chest. There was no way it was either Gibson or Lake that following him with it, trying to punch it. And then Spanger came from nowhere, didn't he? And just blew him away.
Yeah, not much has been spoken about that incident early in the game, but that was one of the more courageous things I've seen on a footy field. It was his turn to go, Spanger, and he went, and I think that's why he was picked, because he does play like a desperate man.
But you wouldn't want to try and go and pick up Hanbury after what we just did to him. I don't think he'll be a very good player from now on. He'll be just worried about any sort of bird-like creature coming from anywhere.
There was two absolute ripper tackles in that first quarter. First of all, Lukey Bruce picked him up on the AFL members' wing there, and in a traditional rugby league style, grabbed him by the shorts and lifted him and drove him back into the ground. And then Ruffhead took the most opportunistic hit you'll ever see. Poor Dan Hanbury, hands up, trying to get the ball in the air. Ruffhead has just work of, I think it was the Sting in the old wrestling days, just speared him a beauty. For the rest of the day, Hanbury was looking around every time he went near the ball. I don't know if you noticed, he went to ground a lot in contest. He didn't want to be over the ball and get hit. Yeah, it just wasn't the same, and it set the tone for the game, and that's where it was won. You know, I was watching the game, and even at half-time, I still had a few nerves thinking we might stuff this up. We got a good lead, but sitting at home watching the replay, the game was well and truly over halfway through that second quarter. They were gone.
So you could really enjoy this game from the third quarter onwards. And Hawthorn never took their foot off the pedal at any stage today. You know, when Jarrah had his chance, he was like, boys, this party's not over. I'm here and I'm going to get 9 touches. You know, how well did he play as a sub?
Yeah, did the job, and it's something he's probably struggled with a few times he's been the sub, but I think he comes on the ground with the game won, and he just thought, well, let's get out here and have some fun, and yeah, racked up a few possessions. But we kicked 5 goals every quarter, 6 in the second and 5 in the other quarters, and, you know, we just kept running away with it. We didn't stop, so that was one of the good things about it anyways, that we just kept piling them on and driving them into the ground. So a fantastic day and one of the most enjoyable grand finals I've ever been to.
Where does, you're a technology guru, tell me, can a DVD wear out from overuse?
I don't know about technology guru. I've watched it 4 times. Don't get sick of it. So I think it'll give 2008 a run for its money in terms of how often I watch it.
Bards, you reckon this is our best one ever because of the way we've had to toil our way through the season, that we had that philosophy about, you know, one soldier goes out, another one steps up. Our biggest soldier went out being the coach for 5 weeks and Bolts stepped up. Just on that effort alone, and then it was capped off by such a glorious grand final.
Yeah, look, it's definitely the best one that I've seen since I've been following, but I guess the 61, when they won the first one after so many years of being the laughingstock of the league, that one's probably up there with one of the best ever as well. But just in terms of adversity that we had to get through this year, it was huge. And, you know, to go in against Sydney, they've got our supposed best player from last year already, and all the world against us, and yeah, we just turned it on and probably, as a commentator said, played the best footy that we've played since the sides of the 80s, I reckon. I haven't seen Hawthorn side in the last 25 years play such an even game of football against a quality opposition. Fair enough, we've had our 165 points, whatever it was, over Port Adelaide, but to play against a decent side and just beat them all ends up, it was huge.
And talking to the 61 grand final, Dad did point out to me on grand final night that he had been to that grand final, which is a fair effort.
Yeah, the only one the old man's missed was last year. He was about 10 days past heart surgery, so he couldn't go. But other than that, he's been on them all, and yeah, he definitely rates this one up there too, as far as the season goes. It's more so about the season, I think. On the day, yeah, beautiful football, but as a season, it was a huge effort.
We have an award, as everyone knows, for Tonk of the Week, and it's for someone in the media. But the media generally got this wrong, didn't they? They billed it as Hawthorn versus Buddy. And you know what? Ironically, it was Hawthorn versus Buddy, because Buddy was the only bloke who played well for Sydney.
I bet the only other one that did all right was Melchesky, and he's going to join young Gaz up at the Gold Coast now, so I don't know how sweet things are looking for Sydney next year. But yeah, Franklin was good. If they had got more ball to him, he would have been very dangerous. But thankfully, we were able to keep the ball out of his area most of the day. And yeah, it was Buddy versus Hawthorn, but Hawthorn prevailed. All
right, well, let's go into some of our normal segments and see where we go with this. But after such a great win, can you have a blast?
Just a little one, mate. It's at the media in general for the way they wrote us off, but especially to David, I'm in the war room and know everything about Football King, who picked the Swans by 68 points. Well, David, you're only about 13 goals off. No, hang on. Was it more than that? 20 goals off? 23 goals off? Something ridiculous. So, yeah, David, you want to be an expert, you might want to have a decent look at what happened during the year between these two sides and pick a reasonable margin, not a ridiculous one. So you got it wrong, mate, and back to the drawing board for you.
Well, ironically, Dermy, who also picked Sydney, sat on the couch at the grand final breakfast and pointed out, he said, yeah, I'm with you, Kingy, it looks like a Sydney win, but it only takes 10 minutes of football from Hawthorn and they can destroy a side. And was 10 minutes of glorious football in the second quarter that killed them. I mean, it was continuous, but there was just a 10-minute purple patch amongst a glorious time. Game over, wasn't it, Adam?
Yeah, it was. What the hell was Will Langford playing at in his 14th or 15th game, just strolling around taking the piss as he was, and a joy to watch. And to be fair to Durham, he did tip the Swans, and that's fair enough, by the way, but if you've ever seen a prouder man after a Hawthorn win, I can't remember it.
Maybe Crawford in Roughhead's house on the Sunday morning, he was pretty proud as well.
Did you see the Instagram from Ruffy? And it was a picture of Bradley Hill on his couch, and underneath it said, finally stop running. He was asleep.
It was very good.
All right, Wetters, a whack.
I've got a big whack and a little whack. The main whack is Caroline Wilson. This woman cooks a story like no one else. Well over a week ago now, she reported as fact that James Hird had been sacked from the Essendon Football Club. And as we sit here tonight, a week and a half on from that story, James Hird is still the coach of the Essendon Football Club. Caro again hiding behind statements like my information at the time and my sources told me that this was going to happen and I reported it as such. It's utter bullshit. She cooked the story. She should fall on her sword and resign. And my second smaller cook is Lewis Jetta. It's a grand final, son. Have a f***ing go.
Well, just because he got beaten by Ben McAvoy in an on-the-ground contest.
He had one kick to half-time.
Yeah, but did you see him out-sprint Cyril 3 years ago?
I did see him look at Bradley Hill running up the wing and decide, no, that's not for me.
All right, well, we have a Tonk of the week, and David King could wear it, Dermot Brereton could wear it, BT could wear it, but BT's heading back to Triple M, ironically, liven things up back there. But I'm actually going to do an anti-Tonk of the week, and I'm going to acknowledge the 3 people that actually picked Hawthorn prior to the game, and you'll be amazed who they were. Thursday night, Sam Newman said 30 points. He wasn't far off. Mark McClure on 3-0. Hawthorn easy, he said. Followed by, and this is the killer, Nathan Buckley. He mightn't be able to coach, but he clearly could pick a winner.
Except for when he's doing Norm Smith votes.
Yeah.
It is funny you mention those 3 names, though. For the buffoonery, I think Sam Newman is very astute football brain. Mark McClure is the only bloke just about in the media today that actually says what he thinks. And Nathan Buckley, well, as you say, ordinary coach, but clearly an astute football mind.
And a reverse or anti-fair suck of the Sav as well. And I'd like to pick on Matt Steffi because he did the look at me in the last quarter to try and get some attention because it was all on Hawthorn. But if I go the anti-fair suck of the Sav, it's got to be the review panel, doesn't it, Bards? There was probably a few opportunities like Lake on the back of the head of Buddy and a Bruce pile drive and a few things that could have been sensationalised, but we've got a full team to play round 1 next year.
Yeah, no one's suspended. That's better than last year, isn't it? quite happy when I heard the match review come back all clear. But it was one of those games, wasn't it? There was bits and pieces, but nothing too untoward. And Brian didn't have a brain fart, which is always a good thing.
Yep, so well done to the review panel. Now, that was all good. We finally found you in the car park, Bards, at some stage. We missed the Tom Jones concert. Wedders really wanted to go back and see Ed Sheeran.
Would have had sunstroke, wouldn't he? I'm surprised you could even play at night. Putting a redhead out in the sun like that.
I should have whacked you, Bards.
What for?
You gave very vague instructions to find a car in an MCG car park at night after a grand final.
If you had just found those practice wickets, you would have been laughing.
You are a genius, you are.
Well, I figured you'd get close and ring. I didn't know the MCG phone system was going to break down in 3 hours after the game still.
Have a working phone would be my advice.
Oh, yeah, the phone was working. It just didn't ring.
So anyway, for everyone, they should know that we had a quiet beer or two in the car park in the Premiership Trophy, sort of. And we said, righto, we'll carry the celebrations on to the following week, the Peter Crimmins Medal. Now, it was a good night, Bards. Thank you for suggesting we go. It could have been quite the opposite if we hadn't won, but, I mean, every time they said boo, they cheered.
Biggest stand ovation of the night. Well, it'd be close between Saw's retirement speech and Matt Spanger getting the Best Clubman award, surely.
Yeah, and Mrs. Howes was impressed that with Brad Sewell's speech, she was amazed that the player knew how to say oxymoron, let alone know what it meant.
He's a very intelligent man, our Brad, and I'm sure he'll be very successful whatever he goes on to.
Yeah, I think many doors will open up. Wedders, were you pleased with the way he went out?
I was and I wasn't. I thought he was very well respected on the night and celebrated on the night. I am an unabashed, massive Brad Sewell fan and have been ever since he walked in the doors at Hawthorn over a decade ago. I would have loved to have seen him play in the GF team, and to be fair, he was left out for good and valid reasons. I also think the club perhaps went a little bit early with the retirement announcement, which happened actually before the evening. That said, yeah, plenty of jobs out there for Sully. Class act. I'd love to see him as an assistant coach at Hawthorn next year, but I think somebody like David King might be looking over his shoulder right at the moment.
Talking of coaching positions, there's a couple available. Lukey Beveridge is moving on to St Kilda, and Brent Guerra's going too. Mrs. Wetlock will be happy with that.
I didn't know Goo was off. Where's Goo off to?
He's going down somewhere down the peninsula to coach.
Weird.
Brent Guerra is coaching Chelsea.
There you go.
He could have a bit of Clarkson about him. He might just want to go coach his own club and then come back as an assistant.
Well, farewell to Goo, and hopefully we'll see Goo back at some stage. And the Spang, well, as I left the Peter Crimmins Medal, he caused mayhem because he jumped in the cab and supporters surrounded the cab, hailing the Spang.
That's awesome.
Did he have sandals on?
No, he had a bodyguard in Luke Loudon with him, though.
You'll next see him at Easter carrying a plank of wood.
Well, that was the Peter Crimmins Medal, and the Peter Crimmins medalist, of course, was the Bardslow medalist as well, one Jordan Lewis, who spoke very well as well, and clearly much better than Ruffy, and you can see why Lewis is going to be the next captain, and Ruffy's just simply going to blow who the runner-up and the winner of the Peter Crimmins Medal is going to be.
What do we think of Ruffy interviewing himself?
I haven't seen this yet, but I'm going to have a look at it.
It's quite good. He's a funny man, Ruffy. He spoke at that Inside the Huddle function earlier in the year, and he had the room in stitches, the stuff he came out with, so he's a bit of a clown, and I could probably see him going media bound after footy. He might just become one of those clowns that just knows when to say something at the right time.
The new Billy Brownless.
Yeah, he may take Billy's spot when he pulls up stumps.
Quite possibly.
All right, well, people will realise that we have been recording on the Thursday after the Peter Crimmins Medal, and a lot's happened today, or a lot has happened since then. Frawley arrived at the club, but that was no surprise to anyone because a pre-recorded video appeared straight after the Crimmins Medal. Someone's probably, a bit overawed by the evening and forgot what buttons to push on Sunday morning.
Did anybody see him at the Crimmins at all? Was he there?
No.
He might have been hiding somewhere, but I think Amber and her team must have jumped the gun on that one. And the very clever people who managed to screenshot it knowing it was going to disappear again. I don't know how they thought of that, but they did. So we knew he was coming. Story was that Hawthorn held back on the announcement after the passing of Robbie Flower, which is probably the right thing to do. Well, it is the right thing to do. Welcome aboard. I guess that puts Matt Spanger back to being the extra tall. He can be back up in defence, back up forward, whatever he needs to be, but he'll still be around. He's got a contract, so welcome Frawley, and I'm betting that we paid nowhere near what there was marked during the year. My information is around about 400,000 by 4 years, and I think that sits pretty comfortably with our structure.
And as a result, today Graham Wright came out and said Shuey was now up to be traded if he wanted to be. So no real surprises there. Bards, you got some thoughts where he might end up?
I don't know, mate. Possibly the Dogs if they're looking for key position players. But it's funny it's come out now they've said he's on the table because all the early in the week was saying that his manager was saying he wants to stay at Hawthorn and fight for his spot, which actually showed a bit of gall. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. If we get a decent offer, I'd imagine we'd let it go. I think after the O'Rourke deal, which you'll speak about shortly, we're probably looking to get back in that second round somewhere. So whether by himself he brings that sort of pick, I'm not sure, but I guess a combination we could get back in there.
So, Bards, clearly I'll turn back to you on John O'Rourke. Is he a value? I don't know much about this kid.
Well, time will tell, mate, but I think these blokes have got some runs on the board when it comes to bringing players in, so we'll go with it. But yeah, we've given up pick 19, which is our first pick, although by the time they deal with compensation, it could be further down the list. And also pick 40, we've got back 43, so we've basically just gone down a couple of spots there. Look, he was a number 2 draft pick when drafted, very skilled on ball, can play inside and outside, all that sort of stuff. So we'll see. It's probably the only way we're going to get anyone from that sort of range in the draft into the club while we're successful, so we'll go with it.
Delistings, Wetters. Were you surprised by any of them so far?
No, not surprised by any of them. Amazed that Cheney gets another year.
So far.
I actually think Sheldon Makers might end up at Geelong if Lonergan leaves, and that would be ironic.
Geelong? Oh. He'd be decimated at training by Tom Hawkins. He'd never get onto the ground.
They'd find him in the fetal position in the change rooms after training, wouldn't they?
Pre-season training, first intra-club match, Ryan, just go pick up Tom. They'll be all over for it. Who knows what's going on in Geelong, you know? They've got a few that want out with their trying to attempt free draft pick.
It's all very interesting, this trade period, isn't it? There's a lot of activity in a way there hasn't been before. So, gentlemen, we've crammed a lot in tonight, and there's plenty more that we could talk about. I've got to go off and work out who's one nearest to the pin. There's plenty more drafting and trading to be done, and we should be catching up with Bolts during the off-season, assuming he's still going to be with the club. So, on that note, it's Go Hawks!